right, let's get started. Welcome to today's ELGL webinar titled Partnering for Creative Engagement. I'm ELGL Executive Director Kirsten Wyatt, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's presentation. ELGL is the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network, and we engage the brightest minds in local government. And we are so pleased to partner on this webinar series with the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement and Civic Leadership. The Davenport Institute works with local governments, nonprofits, and residents to promote and support constructive and broad-based civic involvement in decisions that affect people where they live and work. And later today, we'll share more information with you about a great program offered by the Davenport Institute called the Professional Certificate in Advanced Public Engagement for Local Government. But first, we're going to be talking about creativity. We know that the pandemic has inspired a number of creative solutions to encourage virtual engagement, connection, and a sense of community. And so we want to learn from some of the people who have started these initiatives and talk about how you can bring similar initiatives to your community. And so today we have an all-star panel comprised of people who are doing amazing work during COVID-19. Doug Erickson is the director of the Westland Public Library in Westland, Oregon. Shreya Patel is the co-founder of Letters Against Isolation based in California. And Ambrose is the Director of Administrative Services for the City of Palmdale, California. This webinar is free for ELGL members, and if you've joined us and you're not yet a member, we'd love to have you join. Memberships are $40 per year, and you can sign up at elgl.org. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll save it in our webinar library, and it will be posted on our website later today or tomorrow. And we're streaming this live into the members only group of for ELGL. So your microphones are muted, similar to many webinars that you've attended. At the end, we may have time for you to unmute and ask questions, but at any time during today's presentation, please feel free to use the chat, ask questions, and we'll make sure we ask them to our guests as they come in. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Pooja di Giovanna from the Davenport Institute to get us started.
Well, thank you so much, and everyone for being here. I'm going to go in and out of good lighting, so hopefully I'll lean forward and I'll stay there. I would like to echo what Kirsten said and ask that if any questions come up, please pop them into the chat and we will be monitoring that. This webinar, the idea for it was designed by a focus on this project called Weaving Community. All of the people you're going to hear from, our three panelists, are actively weaving community in creative ways, and that's why they're here. And our hope is that from this webinar, you will walk away with ideas of engagement that you could bring into your communities. We are very lucky to have Graham Bodie from Weaving Community here on the call, and I'm going to do this very quick shameless plug. If you want to learn more about Weaving Community, you can follow the links that Graham's posting. But that is the inspiration for this conversation, because to say that the last 6 months have been challenging would be an understatement. Every space from local businesses to schools has been climbing uphill to figure out what are the next best steps during this time. How do we move forward, overcome these hurdles, and yet continue to focus on engagement and community? But while these times have been challenging, in those 6 months, we've also seen a space created for partnerships as in Weaving Community and creative engagement and ways to overcome hurdles that, in many ways we would not even have recognized without this time to stop and reassess during the pandemic. Communities are reconnecting in ways we never even imagined before the pandemic, and that is so inspiring, which is why we have our panel. And to start, I'm going to ask our panelists to share with us the community engagement challenges they faced when the pandemic hit, because it all started with that challenge and how we overcame it with creative ideas. So to start, to Doug and Ann, what were some of the most pressing topics that came about when the pandemic hit, and what did residents in your area communicate about their needs?
So hi, I'll start. So thank you for having me today. It's really great to be part of this discussion with everyone. So I don't think Palmdale was much different than all of us as this first hit and our communities were all locked down. As local government, I think that first initial challenge is how do you continue to serve when all of our businesses are closed, our schools are closed, and we have to close our programs that are so core to our communities. And for Palmdale, we took a stance that was I think a little bit different than some of the local communities that we've talked to around us, in that we really wanted to make an effort to still be present for our community. And so while we initially locked our doors and weren't able to kind of meet as face-to-face, we still had a lot of staff that continued to work throughout. We did mobilize, teleworking, but we tried to make sure that we were here and present, and that we could continue to participate with our public. We really bolstered, like all of us, our social media presence. In the initial days, we began doing weekly COVID videos to ensure that we were communicating as well as we could with our residents, what was happening, what was changing, because the dynamics of the health orders were changing so rapidly. And we really wanted to make sure we could communicate with our residents in as many formats as possible, since in-person really wasn't an option. And we also really bolstered our Spanish language programming. We made sure that in our videos and things that we did, we were really trying to do more of that bilingually, being that over 50% of our population is Latinx. And we took this as an opportunity to really start improving that communication with our community. So kind of initial days, it was that. And then it was really trying to understand what the community needs were and moving forward to get more information from different stakeholder groups to find out how we need to move forward together. So I'll stop for that and turn it over to Doug to talk about his community.
Sure, thank you, Ann. I'm Doug Erickson, the Westland Library Director, and we faced the same challenges that everybody else did. I think both from the social side of what's happening in our country, we have police related issues in our community. We also have obviously the pandemic. Now we have fires in our community, which some of you may be facing as well. So, but as we entered into COVID in mid-March, we decided as a group, as a staff, to quickly pivot to a more digital format. So I think we went from being what we would consider a library that was innovative to a small movie studio, and eventually into a drive-through curbside, like fast food, only it's books and materials. And then trying to reach people through the digital medium, which is difficult because we all know there's a digital divide as well. And so the underrepresented voice in our community may look a little different than that in other communities, but how do you reach them? And especially when you're not able to have contact with them. So one of our biggest challenges was to immediately start to aggregate information that we thought would be helpful from a digital form, and then also creating our own. So our children's area downstairs became a studio, and we started doing story time down there and recording it and broadcasting it live on Facebook. We started doing STEM programs. We switched our summer reading program, which is usually one of our biggest events, to all online. So we were learning right along with our community on how to actually interface with them. But the thing that I think is a challenge is there's going to be those that are going to embrace that quickly and learn the information about how to do that, especially in a community similar to ours, where potentially technology isn't as a big a challenge as in other places. But it's also, how do you bring meaningful content and how do you actually interact? And so that becomes a challenge as well. So I think it's something we're constantly trying to improve and do. But it's trying to navigate waters that are unfamiliar to us. And so if you look back at any of our early programming, we try to do 2 to 3 programs live per day, or recorded, something that's new content. And there's some goofy stuff out there, and there's some flubbers in there as well. So, but we continue to try, and I think our city and our community has embraced that and enjoyed it. They all want us to be back and operational as an organization that they can come to and have face-to-face contact. But yeah, we're still challenged by, like I said, the underrepresented voices, and those voices, especially in our community, that aren't able to access information because of a technology divide that they might have, or also their ability to even get materials that we may have from curbside when they're quarantined themselves, especially our elderly folks who are in rest homes or in care facilities and memory care where they're not allowed out at all. So how do we bridge that divide as well? So those are some of the challenges that we're facing, as well as trying to engage in our community in meaningful ways. And so I think that's some of the things we have experience with, but by no means am I an expert at this point.
Doug, thank you so much for sharing. And I think that what you mentioned, this level of humility of, we are all no means by experts in this, to echo your words, yet we're figuring it out with the support and active engagement from our communities. And I think that's key. That's in both what you and Anne shared, is this constant touching base with communities, seeing where their needs are and it coming back. And you've also, Doug, set me up very, very well to introduce Shreya. And to Shreya, I ask, you recognize a community space that especially needed to be engaged during this time. And as Doug mentioned, that space being with senior citizens and those who are in nursing homes. So I wanted to ask you, what prompted that recognition of that space? And can you explain what Letters Against Isolation is?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm very excited to talk to all of you. So Letters Against Isolation is a volunteer organization that my younger sister and I started back in April. We are aiming to fight against senior loneliness by writing handwritten messages of joy and positivity to seniors across America and across the world. 3,500 volunteers have written 50,000 letters in just 5 months. And that's enormous, but it all really started due to something very personal and very close to home. My grandmother, she's 75 years old. She lives alone in England, and she is hugely social. She goes to the gym 5 days a week to spend time with her friends. But she's also immunocompromised. So when COVID started to arrive in the UK, her doctor said to start self-isolating. So as you can imagine, this very abrupt change was difficult for her, and it was very easy for her to feel isolated and lonely. And so despite the fact that Saffron and I were calling her every day, we could see it was taking a toll on her mental health. And then one of her friends sent her a letter, and you should have just seen her face when she received it. She showed it to us on FaceTime multiple times. And I remember thinking how special that was, that something so simple and so sweet as just a handwritten note could make such a difference to a person. And so Saffron and I discussed that, and we thought there are going to be many, many seniors around the country who don't have the same familial support as our grandmother might have. And the isolation for them may be even worse and have a greater toll on their mental health and their physical health. So we wanted to see if we could replicate that joy that our grandmother felt. And so we reached out to some local nursing homes, and we didn't expect a response back, but within a week, 200 senior citizens were waiting for a letter. And so we turned to the internet and to our friends and to our family to recruit volunteers. And we've just grown since then.
That is enormous. That is so inspiring and amazing. I will say that it's a level of engagement that we sometimes forget. Like, we have these phones that are basically little computers in our hands, but to write a note, write a letter. I will say that, this initial response that you saw, that was very, very positive. It makes me wonder, what was the response? What were the creative solutions that Doug and Anne, you brought into your communities, as we were overcoming all these new challenges or trying to? So could you share with us some of the creative projects that you worked on and developed, and how the community responded to that? Or your communities, that is.
Yeah, so just echoing on the discussion about our local community seniors. So our city does run a senior center. And one of the other things that our city does is we run a food pantry. We've been running a food pantry for 37 years. And so in both of those regards, we had to shift. So our food pantry was usually you come into the office, you get services. We had to shift to a drive-through model, and not only at our facility, but also to our senior center. So we implemented a drive-through food distribution for our seniors at our senior center. We also developed some new partnerships with some of our local faith-based organizations, because some of our seniors, due to either health issues, couldn't come in to pick up their food. So we developed partnerships with one of our local churches who actually went and delivered boxes to our seniors that couldn't even come to us to do the drive-through. And separately, there was another faith-based organization that working with the seniors would actually go and do shopping for them, so that we could ensure that some of our members of our community that were the most vulnerable in terms of getting access to food had as much access as possible. Our drive-through service for our food bank program, we normally had a smaller service area that we served, and we really opened that up to anyone that was in need. And since April, we've served over 1.8 million pounds of food through our drive-through model and through our partnership with other faith-based organizations that we are able to provide food to that are then giving that out. Other things that we've really focused on is how to impact just the vulnerabilities that our community is facing. So the economic impact has been tremendous to our community, like all. We're at about a 20% unemployment rate right now. We know that there are many people that are vulnerable in their housing. So we've been working in communicating a lot of Zoom meetings with our business community, with our faith-based organizations, with trying to understand what are small ways that we can impact people's lives right now and what they need most. So working with our business community and doing surveying with them. There was really a need for some small business grants for both small and micro businesses. And so we've been able to use some of our CDBG and some of our COVID funding to help address some of those needs. We did an application process and had about 100 applications from our business community within a week. This past week, we opened a mortgage assistance program offering up to $6,000 in mortgage assistance for local residents. And what's been the most telling about that is I don't think we really had a full understanding of what the local need was. And opening that application, in 3 days, we had 185 applicants, and we have funding right now for about 30. So it is really causing us to sit back and really rethink what are other ways that we can help our community or identify resources to help individuals that are really vulnerable of losing their housing and helping with that. So those are a couple of things that we've been doing, along with just virtualizing everything, as Doug said, virtualizing our storytelling, virtualizing our library programs, recording videos. We can't do our National Night Out, so our public safety department is working on virtual options for that to stay connected. But that constant communication has been something our community has really valued from day one, that we have been out there over communicating what we know, because a lot of the things that are coming to all of our communities, we don't really have much control over. They're county health orders or state health orders. And so being that point of contact that is the face for our community of that we're in this together and we want to make sure everyone understands what we can and can't do has been really valuable, and we've received very good feedback in our community for those efforts.
So I think it's been kind of, the successes are a lot what Anne has said, or the things that we're doing are almost exactly what she just said. And so, but to kind of maybe emphasize some of the things that we're doing along the same lines as in Palmdale, is trying to be creative in a way that brings some form of happiness, whether it's silliness or joy or even happy tears. Bringing joy is a difficult thing. And we realize that in libraries, it's all about the human connection or the connection with things. And as we extend that out into our community, and I work with our community partners, faith leaders have become important in our, not just from our emergency preparedness side of things. In our community, we're a bedroom community of Portland, and people usually come here to just raise their children, and they work in Portland, and their connection with the city is probably on the weekends or in the evenings, and it's not always engagement with going to restaurants and other things. And we have mostly small businesses here. So how do we do that? How do we connect with people in a way that if there was an emergency, we would be able to get the word out? Because not everybody's going to read their electronic newsletter that comes in, or the newsletter comes in their water bill, or electronic emails from the city. That sometimes it just goes straight to the spam folder. I know I find mine there sometimes myself. So I think that we have to figure out ways to connect, and that human connection is so important. So that's why I'm very excited about the idea of letter writing from people to people, because that is an actual physical thing that can happen between somebody when they do that and create in that way. But again, we've been working in our food pantries. We're obviously, hunger is a real issue in every community, and especially when we're talking about children. And so how do we get that when some of them are used to going to schools to get their meals, and even the schools are struggling to figure out how to do that in a meaningful way. So we partner with our food pantry and reached out to our faith community, and our faith community overly extended themselves to continue to extend themselves by donating both from their parishioners, and some of them actually have their own pantries themselves that they gather from and can give to. So and we also set up our librarians there from time to time to help with people that may not have access to library cards or information, so we can get them signed up and then get them into the curbside or accessing electronic records or electronic resources, excuse me. So those are just some of the ways, but we're always looking to how we can reach those folks, and how do you reach the underrepresented. And again, each community's underrepresented voices can look much different, and some of them we don't even know. And how do you find those in a world of complete isolation at this point, or where we're not being encouraging human contact with each other? So those become challenges, and you have to spread that network even farther and farther out. And so building community partners, even though it's digitally at this point, hopefully it will be meaningful, and also we'll be able to have human to human contact with them as well, and be able to grow those. So I think coming out of it, hopefully we'll be able to continue to sustain the things that we've been doing that have been meaningful, but also have created relationships that can grow from this point to being more sustaining and have more of an ability to help others in our community.
Thank you so much, Doug. And I think that's been key, is the responses you've been getting from community. And as we all step into this, in many ways, strongly engagement focused space, and the focus being on connecting with communities, is the things that we've learned from this and the things that we're taking with us moving forward. I think that especially the physical letter writing, or the drive-by book concept, like picking up your books drive-through. I know that was something I noticed in my hometown when I visited my mom, is that there was this huge booth set up near her public library to pick up the books as she went through, because she's an avid reader. So I would like to say to Shreya, with your project, you jumped into this engagement space, and I wanted to ask, what are some things that you have learned from that? And in turn, what is some advice you can share with the group? Because you're one of those people that I would assume, people on this call would want to connect with, to see how we can bring in this project. I know Anne mentioned that. How would we bring in this project into our communities? So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I think Doug brings up an excellent point, that to find those people who are underserved and underrepresented, it takes a lot of work. While we reach out to many community partners, nursing homes, Meals on Wheels programs, the people who are reaching out to us have resources, and they have the ability to search for ways for their residents to connect. And that's wonderful, and I love writing to them, but those are the seniors who are least likely to be isolated. So it takes work and it takes effort to find the people who need letters. I think that has been a huge learning for me, how to find those people, who to connect with, how to get in touch with social workers. I think another thing is people have an incredible capacity and desire to do good. I remember when lockdown first started, everyone was, sitting in front of their TVs, watching the news, and there was that sense of hopelessness and fear. And I think the beautiful thing is so many people responded to that with a desire to help and a desire to do good and make an impact on their community. And so I think that's why we grew so fast. And learning how to manage that group of volunteers and create a community within them was also hugely important to our success. So we try and engage with our volunteers in many ways. We have newsletters that go out bi-weekly. We try and cultivate strong relationships with them over email, and we hold events virtually to connect with them and to connect them to each other. And so I think building community goes just beyond the desired targets of your programs to the people who are working on them. And in building that, I think you have more engagement within the program that you're building, and people care about it more deeply, and people will do more to further its goals. I think that's very important. And then how to get involved. So Letters Against Isolation, we have this enormous network of volunteers who are all writing letters, who love it. And so if you reach out to me via our email, which is lettersagainstisolation@gmail.com, I can add you to the rota of places where we write. I will email you to work out some of the details, but we try and make it as easy as possible to connect and to write to people in your communities who do need letters.
One thing, Shreya, you brought up is the significance of creative community engagement in the people who are the active engagers. I'm sorry, there's a neighbor's dog's going crazy. He's engaging. To Anne and Doug, could you speak to how you've been creatively building community within your staff, within your the staff end of the engagers, so to speak?
So internally with our staff, is that the question?
Yes, internally.
I think for us, it's been communication. So being that we do have a lot of our staff that are here, it's been a little bit easier because we do have more people on site than other agencies. But we've had regular Zoom all hands meeting with our city manager, where he has really been very open in communicating to our staff about what's going on, what our budget situation is, because certainly our budget, like all, has been impacted. And so we've been able to talk to our staff about what that is, what the potential outcomes are. We're looking at a sales tax measure and just making sure that everyone understands, if the community doesn't support that, what the outcomes could be. Doug, what I really appreciated Doug's comment about kind of the bringing a sense of joy. So we were able to have, when things opened up a little bit, we felt we really needed to have some face-to-face time with staff. So we did an outdoor luncheon where we were able to support one local restaurant, a very tiny little restaurant that we were able to buy lunch for our staff of about 200, and we have a park right behind City Hall. We were able to social distance and be there. And one of our wonderful recreation staff came out in her dinosaur costume and provided just some well-needed comic relief. The staff, I think, are doing things that really, we have a theme that we've started throughout all of this called Palmdale Cares, and really trying to tell the story of all the different ways that we are serving our community throughout this. But it really has become kind of a mantra for us as staff, and the importance of the work that all of us do in government, that when times are difficult like this, that we are the ones on the front lines that are really trying to make a difference and genuinely serve and genuinely trying to find the solutions to problems. And COVID has been just such a different kind of emergency. I keep waiting, like all of us, of when is it going to end, or when is this normal going to come to us? And it really isn't going to be there. The new normal is going to be something completely different. We're fortunate not to be a community facing fires, but in the middle of COVID, I'm sure many people have seen, we had a young man die by suicide in our park. So we had a young gentleman, an African-American man, that lost his life by suicide. And that created a huge amount of community turmoil for us. What it also told us, though, in spite of everything that was happening, I think all of the outreach and all of the communication we've had with our community really opened doors for us to really sit down with our faith leaders, sit down with other community leaders, and really find out how we can better connect ongoing beyond this pandemic. For staff that were feeling the huge burden of the pain that our community was seeing, having that kind of connectivity with our residents, having the ability to have the tough dialogue was certainly really refreshing for me. We worked with the community group to do a lie-down protest at our park that's right behind City Hall. As a staff member, being able to participate in that was overwhelming and gave me such a new sense of connectivity to my community. And so those kind of moments for me personally throughout all of this have been really helpful in helping recharge my commitment to my community and finding different ways to make sure that we are representing everyone and making sure that we are connecting with all aspects of our community that maybe we haven't had a voice here before. And so it's the unintended consequence of a good disaster that there's many things that come out of it that are more positive than we could ever have anticipated while we deal with the difficult parts.
Thank you. And Doug, well, you anticipated that I was going to come to you. Would you mind speaking to that on your staff and internally, the engagement? And could you please also share a project that has brought about the strongest community feedback and engagement in your space?
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think as people who supervise employees, those of you that do, and I'm sure many of you do, in this kind of time, everyone has fears, including yourself. And I think that my ability or my attempt to try to connect with each of our staff has been very helpful for me to understand what those personal fears are. And all of them are usually centered around what's next. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be laid off? What can we do? So being able to be as transparent as possible and also having compassion is super important. I really enjoy the folks that work with me and that work for me. I think being able to listen to them, and even when the answers are, I don't know, at least you're listening at that point, and with the promise that when you do know, you'll get to them and try to find a creative, workaround on whatever that might be. I think the second thing is to allow people to make mistakes in this time. I think we have so much fear in our social world right now that we're all scared. We're all scared. Do we say the wrong thing? Are we going to do the wrong thing? And kind of know where people's hearts and intentions are and encourage them to try things. And that failure is okay. Meaning if we do a program and it doesn't work, well, we did all that work on a program and we'll use it again maybe after COVID. You want to try doing this kind of thing? This sounds great. Let's consider that. Let's do it. So I think having people still feel challenged and the ability that they're supported by their administrations or their supervisors is really important. The thing I'm hoping is going to work out, so I'll say not a program that we haven't done yet, but that we're really working on, is called Cooking with a Cop. And what we're going to be doing is working inside of our community to make recipes and then film them, do a live show, but also a canned show where we're working at the police stations at their kitchen, and they'll be cooking. And so the sous chef will potentially, or the prep chef will be could be a librarian, it could be the city recorder, it could be another chef, and then always sort of be a police officer, with the end kind of culminating in it's kind of a cook-off between the fire department and the police department. Hopefully there will be a lot of, and we'll make our first responders eat the food. Hopefully we won't make them sick. But that, I think, has got a lot of possibility around it. The other thing that we've continued to do in our community, we're one of the first communities to adopt called Tales to Tales, where children read to therapy dogs. And when I first got here, this was an ongoing program that had worked, and every day was signed up for children underneath the stairs in the children's area to be able to read to dogs. Well, we got a library dog, and our library dog has become, he's big. He's a Leonberger. He's 160 pounds, and his name's Otto. He just, last year, he was awarded the King of the Rose Court, which is our big rose parade in Portland. And he was a canine king, and he's the king. Everybody knows him. And so we're starting to, how do we do this? Because everybody wants to see Otto. In fact, Otto, the library dog, would win the mayoral race here in a landslide if given, but he would also take bribes, so that might not be good. But anyway, the point is that we have a really great program, and it had to stop because we couldn't do it. So now we're reading with Otto, and we're starting that so children can then see Otto and see some of the other library dogs, therapy dogs that we have. And though they can't necessarily read with them, they can read along with them. And we're hoping to start up Zoom calls where where the dogs will be there and they can read with the dogs as well. So those are kind of fun things that we're doing that help out, but and ones that we're anticipating. And I think from the Cooking with the Cops, I think is, again, to show that we're all a city, that we all, get the same paycheck from the same place. The police, the library, the Parks and Rec folks, our finance people, our HR people, our permitting people, and having them all involved in that to kind of have a fun kind of thing to do to show our community that we're here for you, and you can kind of make fun of our bad cooking skills and hopefully have some enjoyment out of it as well.
Doug, I can say this. I will speak for the entire Davenport Institute that if we lived in Oregon, we would sign up for Tales to Tales to hang out with Otto. And I think I'm gonna just speak for everybody in this webinar and ask, if you have a picture of Otto, please drop it into our group chat because we would love to meet Otto. I do wanna ask, how did the cooking idea come about? And because now you've shared a few things that I personally love. I love dogs, I love to cook, I love books. I mean, I'm ready to move to Oregon right now. So
well, the cooking came about because, you know, one thing I have to say about the city I live in, where we have some turmoil in certain areas, which we all face, we are pretty connected as far as our staffs across platforms. Our police have been very involved in the library in a positive way. They come, they read to the kids, they're always in, they're giving them stickers, we have the ability to be a little bit more community focused because of the kind of makeup of our community. Is there's not a lot of action going on that draws their attention to other places all the time. So that we've been fortunate to have that and to see that side of them. But also we meet fairly regularly and we're all friends, and we thought this would be really a fun thing to do. So again, that idea that this could completely fail, this could be like the worst idea of all time, but yeah, we're all willing to try it to see if it will work. And so I think creating that culture where you can try things and say, hey, let's do it. Cooking with a cop, it kind of rhymes. It sounds better than cooking with a permit officer. So, or with permitting or HR. But we're going to incorporate everybody, and everyone's is involved and interested in doing it. In fact, we even have some local chefs that own restaurants that want to be prep chefs for the police or for the librarian, and so that should be funny too. So I think it's just trying things and not knowing if it's going to work or not, but be okay with the fact that it could fail, and just find humor in that and move on. And also know there's going to be naysayers. There are going to be people say, that's a dumb idea. Why are you doing it? Why are you wasting taxpayers' dollars on that? And you're always going to have that, but that shouldn't necessarily prevent you if you think it's a good idea and you think it's positive and you're kind of testing it out and seeing how it will work. I think in the most cases, you're going to be pretty safe, and it's going to enjoy some levity and some happiness, and showing underlyingly at the lower frequencies that people are all working together to try to find something that will be positive for your community.
Thank you so much, Doug, for sharing these ideas. I'm going to ask the audience, if you have questions for any of our panelists, for all of them, please start dropping them into the chat. I'm going to pose what is my last question or two, and then we will turn it over to Kirsten to take the questions from the audience. So starting with you, Shreya, what does the future look like for your project? Whatever the future of the world may be at this point, is this something you plan to continue building? You mentioned you're in your college dorm room now. And so what does Letters Against Isolation look like for the rest of the year and going forward?
Mm-hmm. So the future's bright. We're about to announce a partnership with Nextdoor in tandem with their Project Kind campaign, which is very exciting. So we're expecting a huge surge in volunteers over the next few months. And then I'm also working with people at school to help me find and locate nursing homes around the country who are in need of letters. Beyond that, we've also taken on some volunteers into a more managerial role. They're helping us out with emails because Saffron and I are both at school again. But at its core, senior loneliness isn't going away anytime soon. It existed before the pandemic and it will continue afterwards. My grandmother made me aware of the situation, and I feel connected to the cause now, and I want to continue working on it and advocating on behalf of older adults.
Thank you so much. To Doug and Anne, are there initiatives, I mean, you mentioned a good number of initiatives that you have incorporated right now that you see potential in continuing after the pandemic ends? Because I firmly believe this will all eventually end.
I think I love the optimism that this is going to end. So I hopeful for that as well. One thing that's continuing for us, I don't know how long it's going to continue, is we've been doing childcare for our first responders. So early on, we felt that it was very important that our medical providers, law and fire, and our city staff had childcare. So we've been providing that since the early stages. But what that's been evolving into now has been, because we're in like Los Angeles County and our schools are not open to in-person education. So it's evolving into kind of a day camp model. And so our rec staff have been shifting into that. One of the other things that I'm really hopeful that comes out of this is we have a whole new appreciation for our Parks and Rec employees. For us that sit in the offices all day and work inside, we really haven't had, I think, as full an appreciation of our part-time staff that work our different facilities. And in this whole COVID thing, it's really been our Parks and Rec staff who have stood up in so many different ways that for those of us that work in the office, we continually tell our rec director, where have you been hiding all of these wonderful employees? Here's this group of employees that are all in their 20s, you know, early college, that we have completely failed at using as a recruiting group for careers in local government, beyond just Parks and Rec. We've been working side by side with them. We've been partnering with our medical providers to do testing sites. So myself and city staff for like 3 months worked out in drive-through testing sites, and so we got to work with our park staff. They've been helping us out in different offices and filling gaps because all of our parks are closed, and with the exception of our pools that have just opened. So for me, one of them is that we really are looking at this core of people and finding other ways to engage them beyond just the field work that they're doing, but because of the capacity that they're bringing, and really trying to look at that as a recruitment tool. I think leveraging the electronic engagement that we've had, we've I think had some successes in finding ways to do that. We are continuing with virtual offsite working. So we have adopted formal policies ongoing that we can work remotely. And that was one of those things that I think for the longest time was, oh, we can't do that. We're government. We need to be here in the office. And what we've really found is, no, we don't. We can, in many ways, serve our constituents just as easily and often better when we have the flexibility to do that, because we can be more present and be more available to our community where they need us and when they need us, and do things differently. Like we've employed virtual inspections. Those are things that are tools and services that are going to extend beyond COVID and provide better customer service. So any of the technology advancements, any of the connectivity that, while it's a little burdensome right now because it's mostly of how we have to interact, are things that are going to serve us and serve our community well. And so continuing to look at and continuing to find ways to be innovative are going to be good. And then lastly, one of the things that we're looking at as an organization is, now that we're shifting from into this kind of virtual workforce, we are taking a look at how we organize ourselves. Do we really need hard offices for everyone? Do we really need to have everyone have a computer at their desk? How do we really take this opportunity that's been given to us to really shift how we conduct work as an organization? And in the long run, it'll serve us both internally, but more importantly, it's going to serve our communities better.
I think that we are planning on doing some of the things that we started with COVID. I think we're seeing, if you're looking from how do you analyze, somebody's asking, how do you analyze statistically your outcomes? And I think, when we're talking about story time, we're finding that, on a great day, if we were in place, story time would have, maybe 75 little ones in there. But story time online, we've had, through our tracking measures, 600. So obviously, caregivers and children are together during COVID, especially during the summer parts of COVID. And that's something that allows them to be together to do that. But when we're able to record it and have it, people can come back once they know about it and use it again instead of just being live. I think there's a lot of importance in not just going completely electronic or digital in the future, because I think when you engage the senses and the human-human contact, there's a learning mechanism in there that's very important that is not kind of there when we have to do it digitally. So it's a kind of a portal, but it's and a band-aid, but it's not as good as as it completely, but it's certainly a help. But I also think it's really important to remember that we're also creating another layer here. I'm reminded constantly in my own mind that libraries weren't open to everybody in the United States until 1965, which is in my lifetime. Many generations of underrepresented people in our community, in our world, don't understand what a library does because their parents didn't go there, their grandparents didn't go there, and they don't go there. So even if we're available to them electronically, are they going to want to engage with that? And so we have a bunch of institutional and systemic racism and other issues that we've inherited, and we don't even necessarily know that we have them. But when we are reminded of them, that we're creating another barrier for learning and for being a community, it gives me, I don't know, panic, but it makes me want to try even harder to figure out ways in which we can engage everybody. And I think that we should look at the benefits that this brings us, and this as a kind of way to help with communicating with other people, but not being a reliant tool for us, because there's going to be still, the digital divide is real, and there are going to be many people that are going to be left behind from an education, from a community aspect, if we don't double down and try to engage and start to address some of these issues that are facing us and have been facing us since the inception of this country. So I think it's really important that we start to look at those as another barrier, and yet how are we going to break that one down as well to be truly more of a community.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm going to hand it over to our lovely Kristen Wyatt to take some questions from the audience and take it on our way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our guests today for sharing the wonderful work that you're doing. I'm going to combine a few of the questions that have come in and ask about how, when you were having to really quickly on the fly develop all of these engagement efforts, how did you do it? How did you train up your staff to become, you know, as Doug mentioned, you know, video producers, and how did you reach out and, you know, make sure that your staff was able to have all of the tools that they needed to connect in these empathetic ways? And Shreya, you know, what are some of the techniques that you've used to connect seniors with letter writers? I'm really looking at this from kind of the logistics from all of your vantage points that some of our webinar listeners might take back and implement in their own organizations. So Doug, why don't you get us started, please?
Sure. A lot of trial and error. To be honest with you, for some of the early video stuff that we did, our police, we have a police information officer, public information officer for the police that's really been active for a long time. He's also the school resource officer in doing media. And so he says, I'll come down and teach you guys how I do this on my iPhone. And so we engaged him initially, and then we just started trying to do tutorials, and we just tried to do these clunky videos that we did, and we used Zoom as the recorder, and we put ourselves in front of the Zoom and put record, and then figured out how we would go from there. So it was really just trying and knowing that it wasn't going to be, hopefully it would be better over time, but it was just going all in and having people committed to doing that, to say it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay that it's going to be clunky. You know, people are going to learn right along with us that we're trying, and that they're going to hopefully appreciate the attempt more than the professionalness of it, as we're not, you know, the giant peacock here. We're just trying to figure out what to do. So really was just jumping in with the idea that failure was an option. It was going to be clunky, and we would just try and go from there.
I would echo what Doug said, that I think the effort, clunky as it was at the beginning, the community has really, I think, been very forgiving because the effort has been genuine. I'm a little bit lucky that my communication staff, I have a full-time videographer that's super efficient and can do amazing things in just a few minutes. So I have some great staff on board that can make things look really good pretty quickly. But we still learned our lesson. You know, Zoom we weren't a very, we weren't an organization that used a lot of Zoom meetings or conference, electronic conferencing prior to COVID. And we were just in the middle of an Office 365 implementation right when all this started. So we had to quickly learn how to do all of that in the midst of, not being here and deploying laptops and all of that. So it was a little bit, it was a little challenging, but we learned our lesson on a Zoom call. We were working with a bunch of community partners on having a Zoom meeting about race and community unrest issues. And we had that hacked by some individuals that were putting up inappropriate content. So what was great about that is there wasn't a response to it. And I think it just sealed the importance of that. Our communication isn't going to be perfect, but as long as our intent is right, and as long as we continue to learn and we continue to try to meet what the needs are, that there has been overwhelmingly positive response to that. We see a little bit in our numbers. We know that we've doubled our YouTube, viewers. We've in the early days, our click rate on our constant contact peaked at like 39 to 50%. So we have some data like that, but we haven't really, I think we've been too much in the midst of just trying to respond that we haven't really fully evaluated, which efforts have been the most successful or not. But it's, I think it's continuing to try, continuing to be able to fail. And that's certainly something that we do in our organization, that as long as you're trying, that we have full support of our city manager. If it doesn't go right, okay, we shift. I think that is also one of the gifts that we have going forward, is that for our own employees and developing that relationship with the community, that we're not perfect. We're humans, we're residents, we don't have all the answers, but we're gonna continue to try and continue to use the best data and information and build the best relationships that we have with our community, to know that, so that we really have the best understanding of what the needs are, and we can work with them to try to meet those needs.
Well said. I think with us, it was also a lot of work on the fly. I'm 18, my sister's 16. So we were figuring out a lot of things as we went. I think from the get-go, we always tried to be flexible. We built systems and organizational structures that could handle a lot of people. And so when, people started to flood in, we were able to kind of direct people to the right place. When engaging with nursing homes, we mostly did that via phone and via email. And we would search for like the person, and you'd call them. It's very intuitive. But when engaging with our community, that took a lot more mindful thought. We worked very hard to treat everyone warmly and kindly and with respect, and to connect them to each other. And so in creating those relationships, in connecting people to each other, in creating that engagement, we kind of wove together this community that is fantastic. I will log onto our Facebook group and I'll see people helping each other. We have Zoom parties every month, and you get to see people connecting and talking and sharing their stories. And I'm just so amazed, because in this time, you can't directly see the results of the work you're doing. And so there's got to be something for our volunteers to connect to, so they keep on coming back, so they keep on writing. And I think it's that community that we've built.
It's wonderful, thank you. And I think I'll ask one last question, a quick one. I feel like a theme today has been finding joy in our work and bringing joy to the people that we serve. So I'd love to know, kind of as a closing thought from each of you, what is one thing that's coming up this fall or winter that you're planning or that you're going to do that you're most excited about and that you think is going to bring the most joy and connection to your community?
For Palmdale, it's going to be a Healing Fields. So we're going to be doing, instead of our usual Veterans Day event where we have a mobile Vietnam Memorial Wall, we're going to be doing a healing field of having a field of flags for people who have lost their lives in battle, and recognizing our first responders, medical, law, and fire, and being able as a community to have an outdoor celebration that can be done socially distancing, but that respects and acknowledges the sacrifice made by many.
I think the cooking with the cops going to be kind of one of the things I'm thinking about, but we're also trying to figure out that I'm looking forward to is we have a Harry Potter day at the library, which brings in literally 1,000 people, and we have had double-decker buses, and we have Quidditch games, and we have live owls. It's quite the spectacular thing, but we are obviously not going to be able to do that. So working with my staff at this point to figure out how we can do something that's really fun that everybody likes to do around that theme of Harry Potter and around the form of literacy. I'm excited to hear what my staff has come up with, because they're all saying, Doug, we got great ideas. We want to go forward with this. So I'm kind of excited. That's traditionally a fall event for us. And so I think that will be interesting and fun.
I think other than the Next Door partnership that's going to bring in a lot of new volunteers, and that we're working hard to bring in a lot of new community partners for, one thing we're working on is birthday cards. I think there's something very special about receiving a birthday card. It's a celebration, and as someone who's celebrated my own birthday during lockdown, it's a little bit sad. You can't see your loved ones, you can't see your friends, so we thought that finding a way to get seniors birthday cards on their birthdays would be an amazing thing to do. And so we're going to start rolling that out next month. So I'm very excited about that, and I hope it has a really lovely impact.
Wonderful. Well, those are all joyous and thoughtful ideas. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to turn it back over to Pooja to close us out and share a little bit more about the certificate program that's offered by Davenport.
Yes, thank you so much, especially to all of our panelists and Otto in spirit, of course. I'm going to just assume that, Doug. So our certificate program through the Davenport Institute is designed for local government leaders to dig deeper into the realm of engagement and connecting with our communities. We are offering it online this year because of COVID, and it starts in October. Our admin assistant Taylor has dropped the link in, so if you're interested, please check out the program. We have a few spots open. We are closing things off pretty quickly, and beyond that, Taylor is also going to drop in social media information for Davenport and ELGL. If you follow us, you can learn more about what's going on and stay connected with us. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody that attended our webinar and to our lovely panelists. We hope you have a very good day.